After years of speculation and the last few months of highly anticipated waiting, we finally will be getting more active radar homing missiles. It's been about 2 years since we got the AIM-54 Phoenix as our first ARH missile in the game. After we received this missile, we could pretty much tell that at some point missiles like the AMRAAM and other Fox 3 missiles would be added. It was just announced that they will be adding these missiles in the second update of this year, which will be in early June. There is currently a testing event for these missiles on the dev server, as you can see from the footage in the background. There's a possibility, of course, that this event could come to the live server, however they have not said anything on this, so we will have to wait and see. But for now it is only limited to the dev server. These missiles that are being tested at the moment are the AIM-120A, the R-77, the PL-12, the R-Darter, the Derby, and the Mica. In the dev blog they mentioned that these missiles will be coming to every nation when they're added, so the speculation of many, including myself, that the Mica would not be coming at first was wrong. If you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe because I'm well on my way to 1,000 subscribers. Also, I would like to thank my first and only member, Caden Cantrell. Before I get into the specifics of these missiles, I would like to mention that in this dev vlog, Gaijin said that lower player counts with these new Fox 3 missiles had some interesting results, with, quote, new tactical approaches being created. This is likely very similar to what I've been thinking and have talked about before. I'll get into more specifics throughout this video. However, in general, lower player counts will absolutely mean you can be more tactical in your air-to-air combat, especially with ARH missiles where you can actively turn away to evade these missiles. As you will see from this footage, I and pretty much everyone else are just lobbing all these missiles off fairly quickly and from pretty far. I suspect that with lower player counts, you would likely shoot them less frequently and it would be more akin to jousting than what we see now. Overall, it seems these missiles are fairly close to being finished, though I will say that some of them probably need some fine-tuning in terms of their performance. Some of them seem to shake a bit like how the R-73 likes to. Of course, some of this very well may have to do with the dev server and the fact that it isn't meant to handle as much and can just be buggy in general. As for overall issues, it would seem that the Derby, R-Darter, and the Mica are all missing their models and use a placeholder AIM-120A model. When these missiles are being added to the game fully, I suspect that they are only likely to add the ones that are being tested, and they will be spread throughout different nations. The AIM-120A will end up being found on a multitude of aircraft across many nations in the game. While there are quite a few aircraft that can carry it, I would take a guess and say they probably aren't going to add it to every single plane that's capable of it for various reasons. Part of this is likely because they probably don't want to move too many planes up in BR and leave a pretty big gap right before top tier. As for range, the AIM-120 has a maximum range of about 80 kilometers, though you will not reach this unless you and your target are both really high and extremely fast. Lofting is a feature on the AMRAAM just like all the other Fox 3s that are being added, and it lofts at an angle of 25 degrees. It also has a G limit of 40, so it is pretty maneuverable and very hard to dodge on its own, especially at higher altitudes and closer ranges. The stat card says the 120A has a maximum speed of Mach 4, however you won't be reaching the speed unless you're flying close to Mach 2 and at altitudes of at least 10,000 meters. Using the new TacView-like system for replays, the fastest I did see an AIM-120 get was about Mach 3.3, but of course it immediately slowed down as it ran out of fuel. Of course, you can get these missiles to even higher speeds, however this won't happen unless you are even higher and faster. The AMRAAM will initially be one of the better missiles when it comes to range, as it's about on par with the next missile. That next missile being the PL-12, which is about equal or a bit better with the AIM-120 in terms of range from what I've seen. Again, the stat card here says 80 kilometers of max range, but you really won't get that in game. You can get kills from as far as 40 to 50 kilometers for targets that don't pay a whole lot of attention, and it also has a maximum G load of 40 in the files, though the stat card says 38 Gs, but again, this means nothing. The biggest downside of this missile is the launching platform. The plane being used for its testing is the J-8F, which only carries 2 of them, and the radar it has does not have TWS, which means you have to hard lock the enemy to guide the missile initially. If you were to have multiple targets, you aren't able to launch on multiple enemies quickly unless you unlock and leave your missile on its own to hopefully find the enemy. These issues will be much smaller if Gaijin does indeed decide to lower the player count, so we can just hope. As for the R-77, it has the worst ranges of all the missiles, but on the upside, it is extremely maneuverable, so at closer ranges you are able to pretty reliably hit the enemy unless they're able to notch the missile in time. For the testing event, it's on the MiG-29 SMT, so it can carry a maximum of 6. However, when this comes to the live server, I will personally only carry 2 in addition to 2 R-73s, an R-27ER, and an ET. This will allow you to have a very strong and diverse loadout so that you can contend with enemies who have longer range missiles, as well as in close range fights. While I would technically consider this the worst missile, it isn't bad and can definitely be used to get a ton of kills if used right. The Micah is a missile I was not expecting to see at the beginning. As of right now, it seems far from finished. It seems to be the most messed up flight model wise of all the missiles and likes to go for random things. It also seems to wobble a lot, which is probably due to its thrust vectoring since the R-73 has the same issue. I have found that some other missiles sometimes have this issue, but it is generally later on in their flight when they're lower on energy. The Micah should be one of the strongest missiles that will be added when it is complete, so my hope is that they have a continuous test on the live server, or at least do them occasionally while they work on them. In the test, the Mirage 2000-5F gets 6 of the Micah EM, and I assume eventually the Micah IR will come as well. Then you will be able to carry 4 Micah EM and 2 Micah IR, which would be a pretty strong loadout, especially when you have 2 more missiles than you can have now in total for the Mirage 2000. The Micah will be very good at closer ranges, especially since it has thrust vectoring. However, it won't be as far range as other missiles like the PL-12, but the fact that it can pull a whole 50 Gs is pretty impressive. The last 2 missiles are the R-Darter and the Derby, which currently have identical stats in the files. They should be very similar, but I don't believe the exact same, but I guess we'll see what happens. Currently, these missiles don't have as good of a range as others, but they aren't the worst missiles either. Again, they also aren't the best at closer ranges, but these 2 missiles are still good and the middle of the pack overall. I was surprised to see both of these missiles coming, as I was expecting Gaijin to just throw around the Amrium like candy, but it is nice to see that they are giving some nations their own domestically produced missiles. While I would probably take the AIM-120 or the PL-12 over these, I absolutely won't tell you that they're bad. Personally, I prefer the range of the PL-12 and the 120A over the aspects of the other missiles, but you may like something different. When these missiles are added, it'll be the beginning of a new top-tier era. The same happened when we got missiles like the AIM-9B or the A-7D. Those first-gen missiles weren't super amazing, but they have gotten so much better. Just looking at the first gen of these new missiles that we're about to get, it will be interesting to think about the future of War Thunder. For one, I hope Gaijin does reduce player counts like I already mentioned, as even they said lower player counts showed more interesting results. One of the things that I was predicting was that the overall playstyle at the new top tier will change. You will be able to fight from further and further ranges, and assuming player counts do in fact get lowered to something like 8v8 or 10v10, you will see a lot more engagements where you are both firing a missile then defending from longer ranges. With this, there would likely be less furballs in the center of the map. Even if the player count isn't reduced, I could see many players dying fairly early on in the game and therefore making the furballs less prevalent. Knowing that Gaijin has confirmed that 5th generation fighters will be added eventually, I can pretty much guarantee that at some point we'll see missiles like the AIM-120D and the Meteor among others. At the beginning, gameplay will only be a bit different, but as time goes on it will drastically change as we get more aircraft and weapons. I would also hope that the battle rating system gets an overhaul, but that's probably too much to ask Gaijin. There is also the obligatory hope for another mode like RBEC, where you might be able to use these weapons in a more realistic aspect while still being in RB controls. I've already ranted about this enough recently, so I'll leave it for another day. Once we actually do see these missiles in their completed state, I will make a video covering them in a bit more detail, but overall this event is still pretty fun. If you guys haven't already, please consider liking this video and subscribing, it'll help me out a ton. I'll also be working on some more videos for the dev server, so be on the lookout for those soon.